Hey folks, you're listening to episode 53 of the Deeply Devoted podcast, a ministry of the EFCA Church of Bemidji, Minnesota. My name is Eric Nygren. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at EFCA Bemidji, and we're recording this episode toward the end of December, but by the time this episode is posted, it'll be 2026. So I want to wish everyone a happy new year. But today on the podcast, we're getting to know another one of our global partners, and I'm really excited for you all to get to know my friend and brother in the Lord, Steve Austvold. Steve is the Associate Director of Missions Mobilization with our EFCA North Central District. Some of you might even recall that back in May, on episode 38 of this podcast, we talked with Dave Bliss, who also works in the NCD in Missions Mobilization. So I'm excited to get to this and get into our conversation. Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be with you.
I was just saying to Steve, it's been a little bit since we've talked and seen each other. Sometimes Steve and his wife will buzz up here to Bemidji, or sometimes I'll see them down in the cities at a district event or something like that. But we're connecting via Zoom today to record this. So yeah, good to at least kind of see you face to face today, Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let me start and just say here we are kind of mid-December, almost end of December. So Merry Christmas to you, Steve. And as I said, this is going to post in January. So in advance, Happy New Year. Steve, I'm wondering, are you ready to flip your calendar from 2025 to 2026?
I am. I've got the new calendar behind my December one.
And you've got it all planned out for next year, or...
No, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah. I'm kind of a little bit of the same. I'm inching into January and kind of have an idea of where I'm going, but the year ahead is pretty much a blank slate. But Steve, I think I first met you. I was trying to think about this back in 2019. I think it probably was at our NCD district conference. I at least remember first connecting with you at a conference there. We were probably at your ministry table because I was interested in learning more about opportunities for short-term missions. And I thought, Steve, it might be good for us in our conversation to start by maybe learning a little bit more about who you are and how the Lord led you into the area of global missions.
Yeah, well, thank you, Eric. It's an interesting story because I had been pastoring in Minnesota in early part of the 90s. And in the fall of 1991, I was driving from Minneapolis going back north, and I was listening to KFN or KTIS it was out of the cities talking about the wall, communist wall falling and the need of pastors and missionaries. And I was single at that point, and I thought, gee, I'm going to check this out. I didn't have any connections in Europe, but I talked to Lloyd Childs, who was with the Free Church Mission, which now is Reach Global, and told him about that. Well, he had connections, and he decided that he would go with me along with some other people. So actually, we went the following year in 1992 in the spring, and we went to Poland and also to Romania. And I really sensed after being in Romania, I could really help this young church that had really started after the revolution. And they were, I think, 1 year old as a church, meeting in an orchestra hall. And I had been in a church where I'd been kind of a revitalization pastor, and that contract was coming to an end. And so it seemed like a good thing to do. So I ended up in Romania actually in August of 1992. I was going to go for 2 years. Well, the 2 years stretched through the end of 1997. When my second term, I was there actually in Bucharest, and I had been the pastor of an English International Church right at that point. And I ended up coming back to Fergus Falls, where I grew up, where I'd been gone for 25 years. And I came back because my mom had terminal cancer, so I came back to help care for her. And that's when I actually transitioned with the Free Church Mission into what was called Church Relations, and later became known as Connect. So I was with them until 2008, when I then joined the North Central District doing the same role.
Yeah, so it just neat to kind of hear a little of your story, Steve, about kind of how the Lord worked in your life and how you kind of got bit by the missions bug back then and how he brought you to where you are today. And then kind of thinking about how your story and our church's story lines up a little bit here, Steve. You've been a global partner with our church, boy, long before I came on staff here. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how our church got connected with you.
Yeah, well, Eric, that's a good question. Your church actually started to support me in 1992 when I went to Romania. Fred Martin was your senior pastor at that point. I had met him earlier because we were both working on a Doctor of Ministry degree at TEDS. And I don't know if we had classes together, but anyway, we connected and he heard I was going to be going to Romania. And that's kind of how it happened, where your church decided to start supporting me.
Yeah, and we've been partners ever since. And as I mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how that partnership has worked itself out over the years. Whether it's you coming up to Bemidji or some of the trips and things like that we've done. But Steve, we want to kind of understand a little bit more about your role with the district, with the NCD. Part of your title is Missions Mobilizer. And I wonder if you could just kind of help us understand what does a missions mobilizer do?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. There's really two part to the answer here. First of all, think of missions, and I like to use the passage from Matthew 28, the Great Commission, where Jesus tells us to go and make disciples of all the nations. And that's the Matthew 28, 18 to 20 passage. And then the Acts 1, 8, where Jesus tells his disciples, again, after he's risen from the dead, but before his ascension to heaven, that they should go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth, and in a sense, be his witness. So the scripture really clarifies what we're supposed to be doing, because these are some of the last words of Jesus Christ. So the mission part is that. So it's a biblical based. The mobilizer part is often a little more confusing. I was at a church years ago one time, and a person came up to me and he said, "Well, that's an army term." And I hadn't thought of it that way, but think of mobilizing the troops.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I really believe that all Christians and all churches should be Great Commission Christians, and all churches should be Great Commission churches. So it's not just for the pastors, not just for the staff, not just for people who are called into full-time work, but all of us should be involved in the Great Commission. So mobilizing people, in a sense, it's to mobilize everybody in a church. So what does that mean? Well, mobilizing people is to help them you want to give them information. So like about the persecuted church, for example, or church planting. So people then can pray. So first they need to be informed. Then they can pray. Then maybe they can give of their resources or time. Maybe God might call in them to go short term or long term and be involved in mission trips or long-term service, and then finally sharing Christ with other people. So in a sense, the mobilizer part is helping all people to be involved in the Great Commission.
Yeah, and I love that picture because it is easy, especially if your local church like ours has what we call our Global Connections team, kind of our missions committee. A lot of churches have a missions committee, and it's easy to sort of think, well, they're the ones that are kind of making sure that all the missions boxes are checked for our church. But I love how you talk about that, Steve, that really mobilizing the whole church, every member of the church to think about missions, to be involved in to some degree in missions. Obviously, person to person, it's going to look different. And I love some of those even examples that you were sharing about ways that we can be involved there. Yeah. One of the things that I think about, Steve, is about 5 years ago. I think it was probably in 2020. That sort of era is a little blurry, of course, but I think during that year we had you come up to Bemidji and you helped put on a workshop for us to help us as a church develop a missions strategy. And I know that for myself and our Global Connections team, that really proved invaluable. It was something that we really needed. And so, Steve, I wonder if you would help us to understand, first of all, what is a mission strategy and why should a local church think strategically about missions?
Yeah, another good question, Eric. I think every church has a calling, what that might be, whether it's working like where you are with Native Americans in northern Minnesota or going someplace to the ends of the earth. Every church has a different makeup of people, whether it's rural or urban or wherever they may be. Could be a small church, a large church. But I think with the people that are in the church, everybody has potential of serving the Lord some way. And so a mission strategy, when we came in, the question that we posed to the church is, what does God want to do with your church? Where is God leading your church to be involved in? So what we do then is we talk about what God's doing in the world, new trends, new opportunities, and then we bring it back to the people who are attending, your global partners, your team, your staff, other interested people, and say, hey, these are things that we're interested in. This is how we want to focus with supporting people, our budget, short-term trips, or whatever it may be. So it's really geared to help a local church to think clearly what God might want them to do in the future.
Yeah, and I think that providing some clarity was really helpful for us because in a church full of people, we all have different values and different contexts in which we think about missions. And if we brought all of those things to the table, there'd be too much for us to be involved with. You have to be a little bit selective because you do have limited people and time and resources and finances and things like that. So to kind of help, and I love that question. Just it seems fundamental, but what does God want for this local church, which might be different from that local church over there, even regionally? So, that was super helpful. And one of the things that you mentioned there, Steve, was short-term opportunities. I know that you and I have served on a couple of occasions on some short-term missions opportunities. One was international, one was stateside. And Steve, I'm sure that over the years you've been a part of many of these short-term teams. I want to ask you, what do you enjoy about those kinds of opportunities, those short-term opportunities, and what's the value of local churches getting involved in short-term missions?
Yeah, well, first part of the answer here is I like, again, the mobilization part. I like to see people go and be on a frontline ministry. Like, for example, when Eric, you came and there were people from your church, that was our first team ever to Lake Charles.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not the first, but maybe the second team. But I remember when we went to this one house and we were doing demo in the house, and you were taking a bathroom apart or something, and
That's right.
And we were pulling tiles off the ceiling and all that. And it was a gospel witness to that lady and her family, and then to the neighborhood. But then it was an impact, I think, also for the people on your team, where they got hopefully more involved in Great Commission work, whether it was, and there in particular was with crisis response. So it impacts people. I just had a team this last October down to Fort Myers, Florida, and very impactful for them. They're still communicating back and forth with texts and praying for one another. And I think it helps people to grow spiritually in their own walk with the Lord.
Yeah, I would echo that for myself. I've been involved in a number of short-term opportunities over the years, both international and stateside, and they've definitely left an imprint on me. I do remember being a part of that team down in Lake Charles. That was a phenomenal experience, especially a few of us that had zero construction experience, but deconstruction, demolition, no problem. I can handle that.
We're pretty good at that.
Yeah, I can break things, not a problem. Just tell me where to swing the sledgehammer. But no, but it was good because I think one of those, especially that experience, it wasn't just about the building, doing the work on the building. Yeah, some of the big memories were some of the conversations we had with the homeowners or people in the neighborhood, or just even folks that served on that local staff, or some of the members of the church and things like that. So you
So
do carry
what
those.
happened over the years, over 4.5 years, I think I led 10 different
Hmm.
teams down to Lake Charles. And it was just this last fall that they actually closed the site officially.
Hmm.
But just impactful for many homeowners. They had
Yeah.
full-time staff with crisis response working there, but then a lot of different teams that came in and were impacting the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve, I also want to kind of ask you. I know you mentioned that you served in Romania, and you've done a number of things internationally. Probably some of those places we can't talk about just for security reasons. But Steve, do you have any sort of funny or memorable stories that you wouldn't mind sharing about maybe some of those overseas experiences?
Yeah, I actually had to think about that for a minute. And one of them, this wasn't so much a funny one, but it was an eye-opening one. When I lived in Romania, I had different um, mission leaders come, and I'd ask them a question. What do you see in the city? And one man said, when I was in the city of Craiova, I don't see any storm drains. Oh, all of a sudden it made sense when it rained heavy why the streets were flooded. And when I lived in Bucharest, um, a mission leader was there, and I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "I don't see any pregnant women." Well, at that point, it was interesting because they had the highest abortion rate in the world at that time. Under communism, abortion was illegal because they really wanted to grow the population of the country. But once communism fell, it was free for all, and there was um, a lot of abortions were taking
Mm.
place. One of the interesting things, just on spiritual warfare, and I didn't realize it till almost it happened, when on Monday, Thursday, we would show the Jesus film
Mm.
at the orchestra hall where we met. And right in the middle of the first season that we were doing that, the first year there, it had not rained for weeks. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the film, right when Jesus was getting on the cross, a thunderstorm came over, a lot of lightning and noise outside, and people were distracted by that. And a lot of people didn't have cars, so they concerned about getting home. But that happened right at the
Mm.
time of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, when that film was being shown, that storm went through. And the next year, again, it had been nice weather weeks before and after, but and several hours before the film was going to be shown, just a heavy rain and the streets flooded with water. I think, again, very clearly, it was a spiritual act that was taking place
Mm.
against the gospel opportunity that we're taking having happen there.
Yeah. Yeah, I can think about times again when I've been, especially in international situations where, yeah, and you've done a good job, Steve, just even on teams that I've been a part of helping teams prepare for some of those things. You can't prepare for everything, but that the culture is going to be different. I know specifically talking about you're going to be uncomfortable. Some of your preferences are not going to be met.
Right.
The level of spiritual warfare, you can tell people about that, but then when you experience it, it feels um, just really otherworldly, and not to be spooky and scary about it, but that these opportunities, whether it's stateside or international, they're not vacation trips. They're not sightseeing opportunities. Although you do get to have a little fun and see the culture and see the region, that they can be rather intense in some of those things, and as you said, rather eye opening. Yeah.
I'll just share one more thing. One of the most discouraging times when I first got to Romania, I had only been there a few weeks, and I'm living alone now in this apartment for a short while. I didn't know the language, I didn't know really anything, and I didn't have any food in this apartment. So I was going out on a Saturday noon and I was going to buy bread. They were selling bread on the street, and like tables, they'd have bread laid out. And I didn't know the name of bread. I didn't know the price of bread. I didn't even know how to ask. And I thought, what am I doing here? I can't even buy bread. That was kind of my
Mm,
low point. But what kept me there was God had called me.
mm,
Eventually, I knew the name of bread, how to ask for it, and what the price was. But that was a low point. What am I
mm.
doing here? I can't even buy bread. But fortunately, I learned how to buy bread, and then things got better. But what keeps us on the mission field or in a role is God calls us there,
Yeah.
and we have to make sure that we're there where He's called us, and we don't leave until He releases that call.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, a lot of our global partners that we support, would probably echo that. They could talk about their call to the field, whether that's local or different parts of the U.S. or serving overseas. And I know for us as a church, when we think about these partnerships, primarily we think about a global partner, a partnership in terms of financial support. We know that in our church's budget, we set aside a certain amount of dollars to support our different global partners, and that's of course an essential piece of that. But Steve, maybe you could tell us some other really practical ways that our church family could feel more connected with those we support.
Well, yeah, that's always an important thing to do. What some churches do, and I don't know, remember if your church is doing this, but some churches have small groups,
Yeah.
and some small groups will maybe adopt a missionary. So when they come and visit, they might give them hospitality, provide meals for them, praying for them on a regular basis. A lot of churches don't do that, but that's just one way to connect in a better way. I think if people want to connect with a certain missionary to get their newsletter to stay current, we send out newsletters quarterly. We also have an advanced prayer letter that we send out monthly for people who really want to be connected with us, especially with our kind of schedule for the month and praying for us with that kind of thing. And then when we would come, maybe inviting us over for a meal, make sure that they attend a Sunday school class, we're doing a presentation or that kind of thing. So there's ways to get, again, if you don't meet a missionary, if you don't know who they are, if you don't pray for them or talk with them, you're really not going to know them. But I like what your church has as well. It's a little, I assume you're still doing it. You used to have a little flip card,
Yep.
kind of a calendar where you had maybe the missionary of a certain day. And I know our picture is in there.
Yep.
And your church each family can have something like that where they can pray for that particular missionary on that day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our flip book, and we do that just about maybe every other year. And as soon as we print one, it seems like it goes out of date really quick. But we try to keep it up to date. But yeah, I would say, especially for me personally, one of the ways that I feel most connected, it's nice to get prayer letters or newsletters and things like that. But when I'm praying for our global partners, especially day to day, it really helps me to engage because I'm looking at very specific requests. I'm praying for specific people that they're working with, or they some of our partners will send requests and say, next week we're going to do this, or we're going to have this meeting or this event or something. Please pray for that. And a lot of times I don't always get to hear the results of that, but my heart gets engaged in the day-to-day work of the gospel with our global partners, all over the world. So lots of good ways to be involved there. Steve, I wanted to ask you this question. You've been involved with missions in one way or another for a number of years. I'm kind of curious, just in your experience, what are some of the trends that you've noticed over those years in terms of, just some of the trends in missions? And then what would you say maybe is true of, if I can say, the state of missions as we enter 2026?
Yeah, we could talk a long time about all of that, Eric.
Yeah.
Some things that have been in the news recently, the persecution, especially was brought to the front in early November on the International Day of Prayer. thinking of Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa, where there's a lot of persecution that's going on there. Churches are burned, people are kidnapped, people are killed by a different variety of groups. Just a few weeks ago, a school was attacked, and all the students were taken, and I think 50 or so of those were escaped. But it's not just radical groups like ISIS or something, but can be others too who want profit by selling people, getting money and releasing them. So persecution is really a big deal, and there are more Christians, I think, who are being attacked and persecuted nowadays than almost any time in history. And some places it's very difficult being a Christian. The one country where you visited with me in Asia, most of the states in that country have anti-conversion laws now, and it's very difficult for being a Christian in some of those particular places. So persecution is something that we need to be aware of, and I think we can really be praying for our brothers and sisters who are being persecuted for wisdom for them, for boldness, and just for protection as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that is really quite interesting, we were on vacation last month and spent a few days in Dublin, Ireland. And we went to a church on a Sunday morning there. And what surprised us, it meets in a boxing arena. The pastor was preaching on the actual platform where they do the boxing. And it's a surround kind of arena. So there are 500 plus people there. But there were people there from 70 different nationalities, 70 different countries around the world.
Wow.
Who are coming to this church. He gives an altar call every Sunday after the service. That particular day, outside in the parking lot, they were doing a baptism in a portable tank that they had, but people from all over. So one of the trends, there's a real big migration of people. Now, this was just in Ireland, but like 20 years ago, there would not have been anything like that. But in Ireland, there's with all these nationalities of people there. So there's a real movement of people. So it's a diaspora of people coming, a lot of people in Europe. It's revitalizing some of the churches that maybe have not been, say, very much alive or dying, but people are coming up from Africa or other places. So that's a wonderful thing that's taking place. One of the interesting trends with the Reach Global mission is that one of the fastest growing areas is in Middle East, North Africa, of getting new recruits to go in some of these countries where it's very difficult to be a Christian, much less be a Christ worker there. So that's something that's taking place as well, especially after what happened with Charlie Kirk this fall. There's been a lot of growth, especially with his Turning Point organization. But at the same time, people are coming to Christ. I've heard that in England, it's especially young men in their 20s who are really returning to church. And I think that's true somewhat in the States. Not so much about women, I hear, but especially young men. People are looking for answers. They're looking for fulfillment. The gospel continues to go forth in some of the closed countries through satellite transmission and radio broadcasts. So where it's illegal to meet, for example, like in Iran, there's a real work of God. One of the fastest growing churches in the world is actually, I think, in Iran today. Wow. It's an underground church. It's a hidden church, but people are bold in their witness for Christ. So the South America is also becoming a real sending nation of sending missionaries out. Used to be South Korea in the past, but South America is really doing that now as well. So it's like new people are being called and compelled to go out to be a witness for Christ. So those are some trends.
Yeah, and if you focus on some of those first things you mentioned, the level of persecution in the world, that can be really discouraging. But I think we balance that out with just seeing what the Lord's doing globally as His church, as His kingdom expands. We're here really excited about some of the work in Middle East, North Africa. Those are some of our newest global partners are folks that are serving with Reach Global MENA, and it's exciting to see, just even as it's just getting started in some of these places, just what the Lord is doing already. So to keep our brothers and sisters in the Lord in prayer in some of these tough places, but also to celebrate some of the really exciting things that the Lord's doing, even where from our perspective, it would seem like it would be impossible for the gospel to break through, but he's doing some pretty amazing things. Yeah.
Very true. And even up in northern Minnesota on one of the reservations, I think you're supporting one of your partners up there. I'm not going to say his name for maybe security here, but seen a tremendous response so far in where he's working in this one church there on one of the reservations. So
just in our backyard, basically. Yeah. Well, Steve, I'm just so thankful for your partnership in the gospel, for the years I've known you, and just for the long relationship you've had with our church family, and just your ministry in the district. And as we wrap up here on this podcast, at the end of every episode, I like to ask our guests one final question, which may or may not be related to some of the things we've been talking about. But here at our church, we regularly talk about becoming deeply devoted followers of Jesus together. That's what discipleship looks like for us. So, Steve, I wonder if you'd share with us maybe just one thing that you have been blessed by lately that you find is deepening your own devotion to Jesus.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I do several things, and I thank InterVarsity Christian Fellowship years ago for challenging me to read the Bible daily. So I read the one-year Bible in the morning. In the evening, one of the things I do, because I traveled for a short while years ago back in the late 80s with Barnabas International. And since that time, I have a prayer journal where every evening I write the word praise, and then I write whether it's a word or a phrase where I see where God worked that day, whether it's meeting someone or a scripture, an answer to prayer, or some encounter of whatever it was, a service. So I can go back all these years now, over 30 years of doing this, and seeing where God has worked. But it's just one word or a phrase. It's not like where I'm writing a paragraph like a journal, but just a word or a phrase, something like that. But I always do that. And sometimes they're very easy to write because maybe I think of two or three things. But also, in some days, sometimes I have to just sit and think, okay, what's something I can really see where God at work today? And I sometimes have to think longer where I see that. But that's been a blessing. And then I usually read a short devotional in the evening as well.
Well, Steve, this has been fun. It's been good to catch up. We'll have to have you up this way sometime, and I know a lot of our folks would love to see you and your wife again sometime soon. And but I'm sure you're pulled all over the district. You're probably in churches all over, so we'll patiently wait our turn.
We'd love to come back, Eric. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Deeply Devoted podcast. My thanks to Steve Austvold for joining me today. Folks, we would encourage you to subscribe to the Deeply Devoted podcast on your favorite listening platform so you don't miss any episodes. You can keep an eye on our church bulletin for details about our next episode. But until then, have a great week, and thanks for listening.